Am I lodged in the hearts of all? From me are memory, knowledge, and the cure for indecisiveness. I am indeed he who is known by all the Vedas. I indeed am the author of the Vedanta, and I too the knower of the Vedas. Just as much delight and just as much feelings one gets while chanting verse 7 of this chapter when Sri Krishna says, Mamaiva ahamsho jivaloke, a fragment or fraction of my own self, one should get as much bliss and maybe even more bliss while chanting this verse. When God said that Mamaiva ahamsho jivaloke, then this meant that the individual soul is an internal fragment or fraction of him, just like a father says to his son that, Son, you are mine. But in this case, the father and son are different. The son can be away from his father, and all of this can happen. Many times when the son does something, then the father may not find out. This can also happen, but it is not like that with God. What does God say? In this verse, God says, Sarvasya cha aham hridi samnivishto. I am lodged in the heart of all. God resides in the hearts of all. That is, Srimad Bhagavad Gita has done a very big revolution in this quote. Until now, people thought that God is somewhere above in the sky. God is somewhere in the heaven. God is somewhere in the Vaikuntha, the abode of Lord Vishnu. God is somewhere within the four walls of the temple, or God is hidden behind the glass of photos. Sri Krishna has broken all doubts and has said in one sentence that Sarvasya cha aham hridi samnivishto. I am lodged in the hearts of all. He said that I am in your heart, and not just in your heart, but in the hearts of all. God says that I reside in all hearts. Again, just like the verse Mamayava amsho jivaloke, a fragment or fraction of my own self, this verse is nourishing for a Gnani, wise person, inspiring for a Karma Yogi, a yogi on the path of actions, and reassuring for a Bhakta, a devotee. The devotee feels that my God is in my heart. Lord, until now I thought that I was getting so many sorrows and that you were not seeing and that you did not know about them. God says, I know about everything, my child. There is a Bhakti 5-line poem of an Urdu poet that I like very much and I remember from my childhood, that when a person feels sad, then the person goes to God and says, God, why did this happen? And why do I get sorrows? Many times people begin to say this. Bande ko jo tarpaye, wo bande ka khuda nahi. One who gives sorrows to a person is not that person's God. On the other hand, a believing person says, Bande mein khud tarapta hai, wo bande se khuda nahi. One who himself suffers inside a person is not different from that person. My God is also experiencing the sorrows that I am going through. God is inside our hearts. The Karma Yogi, the yogi on the path of actions, realizes that God is a witness in his heart, and therefore, whenever somebody is about to do something wrong, then he immediately stops himself thinking that, oh, is God in my heart? This judge is different. The book of Chitragupta, the god assigned with the task of keeping records of actions by beings, is not somewhere above, but it is right here in our hearts. Therefore, when the individual goes and stands by the Supreme Soul, and the Supreme Soul begins to make a decision, then the individual will not be able to argue that, no, God, why did this happen? God asks someone because God will say, I do not need to ask anyone. I am residing in your heart. You may be able to change the witnesses of courts in this world by saying that I did not mean it, this happened and that happened. And you can say this, but this never works with God. There is not even a need for a witness because God says, I am the judge and I am the witness. And I know what was on your mind at that time. You may be able to fool, but how will you be able to fool the Supreme Soul? Look how splendid God's system is. He has given us independence in performing actions and has put fruits in our hands. And by saying that, he has put the fruits in our hands, this does not mean that he has done this indiscriminately. So the actions one performs, so the fruits that he will get. And the proof of this is himself. This becomes a completely foolproof system. If a judge is intelligent, if a judge is without prejudice, and if a judge is free from the sin, then nobody will ever be able to get away by performing a crime. Then no problems comes in justice. And another thing is that if a judge has not seen anything, then he has to rely upon a witness report. But this judge says that, I am the witness. Now there is no possibility of anyone getting away with anything if they do anything wrong. And this is why you should understand that this universe is a perfect system. This universe is a perfect system, it is not chaos. Yasmachaya yenacha yatha yacha yavache yatracha. Whoever has acted wherever in whatever situation, from whoever in whatever way, they will get the fruits of their actions in the same situation, in the same way, from the same person. It is also said that Ram na sarvara kota hoina. Sri Ram's accounts can never be wrong. There can be a mistake in our understanding, but there can never be mistakes in Sri Ram's accounts. He is sitting there himself. Sarvasya cha aham hridisan nivishta. I am lodged in the hearts of all. And why did he sit in there himself? There is a very nice story in Greek mythology. The story is that God was in the world before. Whenever you wanted to meet him, then you could go and meet him. Just like you go to the temple to bow down to the idol, God was just like that before. The actual God was sitting there. God is in the idol, but this is because we have these feelings in our hearts, and therefore we express these to the idol. But in the beginning, it was such that God would be sitting there, and you can go there to say what you wanted to say, to ask questions, and you could do all of this. God would express himself with a smile and do everything like this. He would ask you, "You have come today, how are you?" But God got a few difficulties afterwards, because when people went to see him, they only brought complaints with them, or they would go to ask for something. They would say that, "Oh God, this has happened. Oh God, that has happened. My neighbour has got this, so why did I not get this? God, why did he get this and not me?" People kept doing this and God became frustrated. God thought that, am I sitting here just for this? Therefore, God began to go further and further away. God was easily available before, but then he would go on top of a mountain, at the bottom of the ocean, or in the jungle. When 1 or 2 days went, then people would see that they could not see God inside their houses or in their palaces. They would go and find God in the jungle. They would also find God at the top of the mountain. They would find God at the bottom of the ocean. They would find God everywhere, and they would reach there. And once they found out that God was there, then the lions began to perform again in that place. God became frustrated. God called a meeting of the good people and asked that, I have become overburdened. I have created people, but I have become frustrated by these people. This is because people only come to me with complaints, and people only come to me to ask for things. And wherever I go to hide, people are so clever that they come and find me. Human beings are intelligent. Show me such a place where people will not be able to find me. The people gave many different suggestions. They said that, God, go here and go there. God said that I have made all of these efforts. There was an elderly person there who was very good. He thought that it was not worth saying this in front of everyone, and he went to whispering God is here, that God, go there. And so much merriment came to God's face, God became extremely pleased. From that day until now, God has only been happy. All the people asked the elderly person that, where did you send God? We want to complain to God, and you want to ask God for things. We all want to do these things, but we cannot find God anymore. Where is he? God got a lot of peace. The elderly person did not tell all of these people, but you get the answer in the Gita what this elderly person whispered in their ears of the God. Sarvasya cha aham hridisan nivishta. I am lodged in the hearts of all. The elderly person said that, God, you go and sit in the hearts of human beings. This is because these people are very clever and are very, very intelligent. They will search for you everywhere, but their intellect will not work so much that they will not look inside themselves to find God. And the person who begins to look inside will stop asking and will stop making complaints. God, when they will come inside from you, then they will only come to you to meet you. That is why God has so much peace. The reason for this is that all the people will complain, and all the people who will ask for things are running around on the outside, whereas the people who want to just meet God go inside, and this is it. I am lodged in the hearts of all. God says that smriti, memory, is from Him. Gnan, wisdom, is from Him. And the loss of both of these are from Him. We all know that smriti, memory, happens as a result of God. That is why many times when we are trying to remember, then we cannot remember it. It just does not come. It is not God's wish, and therefore it will not come. And many times it also comes. What a power of smriti, memory, God has given us. If you sit down to talk about a few things, then the door of it will open immediately. All the information in relation to it will come. When you are sitting in an office, then all the drawers open. You remember where you ordered all the stock from, how much is sitting there, how much you have sold, and everything keeps coming like this. Or you are sitting at home and a friend comes to your house. Then when that happens, then the office drawer is closed and the drawer of the friend opens. You say that when we went on this holy pilgrimage there, how much did we enjoy it? This happened and that happened. Do you ever see the person again? This begins and you remember it. Where do you remember it from? All the drawers open and close very quickly. If this is not God's grace, then what is it? That is why God says that smriti, memory, comes from Him. Great saints say it very nicely that the God who has given us the power of smriti, have you used this power of smriti for that same God? Have you used that power of smriti to remember God? God also says that Gnan, wisdom, comes from Him. Gnan comes as a result of the grace of the Supreme Soul. God has taught about a very important thing when He says the word abohanam. You will find this word quite new. People give the word abohanam the simple and straightforward meaning of forgetfulness. When you forget something, then this is also because of God. But if you want to get the true meaning of the word abohanam, then it is not forgetting, or it is not the absence of remembrance. What does abohanam mean? A lot of faults arise in the intellect because of thoughts. I will repeat. A lot of faults arise in the intellect because of thoughts. What are these faults? The first are doubts. This comes to the intellect when a person keeps thinking. This is doubts. The second is indecisiveness. One goes from one thing to another, and then from the other two things to another. This is when the mind keeps jumping from one place to the other. People say that when we go home, then what should we cook? Should we cook beans and rice? No, vegetable curry will do. No, rather than vegetable curry, let's make some savouries. Rather than savouries, let's make chapatis. This is indecisiveness. A person does not want the first thing, he wants a second thing, and a third thing. This is constantly going on. All these doubts and indecisiveness are faults of the intellect. Why has God given us this intellect? It is there in order to make decisions, and the intellect keeps creating indecisiveness. This is because of thoughts. Solving this is called abohanam. When the intellect becomes free from doubts, and the intellect becomes free from indecisiveness, then when the intellect gets this state, it is called abohanam. When God says this is also from Him. God says that He is indeed He who is the only one to be known by all the Vedas. This is the reason for the Vedas, to know about God and to get the experience of God. And God says that He is indeed the author of the Vedanta, and He is also the knower of the Vedas. God is He that is to be known by the Vedas. God is the knower of the Vedas, and God is also the author of the Vedānta. God begins a very beautiful description in the 16th verse. The spiritual knowledge that begins from the 16th chapter is of the level of Purushottama Mattva, the Supreme Person. This discussion on spiritual knowledge will be a little dry. One time a person who I know named Bramilaben said a very important thing. I know that a lot of grace of the Supreme Soul has showered in my life, but one thing has always been giving me grief, that despite being a science student, I have never had a formal education of Sanskrit. After listening to my spiritual discourses and my holy talks, all the listeners always say that you chant it very well. Where did you study Sanskrit? People immediately ask me whether I learnt it in Kashi, Banaras, or Prayag. I fold my two hands and say, I never went to Kashi, Banaras, or Prayag to study it. I am a science graduate. I feel a sense of achievement about this, and I have no complaints about this in life. This is because if I had gone to study there, then it would have so happened that there would have been an increase of one Pandit priest in India, and perhaps you would not meet Bhupendrabhai Pandya, but one more Pandit priest. It is as a result of what I studied that I see something different. I studied science, and therefore my perspective in looking at life is different. But I have a lot of love towards the language because of the culture and the morals I was taught in my house when I was young. Before I learned to speak, I was chanting Sanskrit verses. Just like the children of today sing about Jack and Jill, I would chant prayers such as Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, or Vasudevastam Devam, or Kavyashatra Vinodena Kalo Gachyati Himmatam Visyane Na Murkhanam Nirdra Kalaya Nava. I would chant all of this without knowing their meaning. I often say during my discourses that it is very easily possible to know Sanskrit. The very meaning of the word Sanskrit is cultured. Therefore, Sanskrit is not only a language, but it is also a culture. It is a way of life. There is nothing wrong in learning English, but we should know our mother tongue. We are seeing a lot of effort in the last 15 or 20 years to give awakening to learn our Matrubhasha, mother tongue. But there has always been a heat and a pain in my heart that as well as knowing our Matrubhasha, we should also know our Devbhasha, God tongue. Sanskrit is our Devbhasha, God tongue. It is that which is in the speech of Devata, gods, and particularly being in the lineage of Indian culture, we should know about it. I was making a lot of efforts. Whenever somebody asks me, then I always instruct them that the scriptures that Pujyashree Bhupendrabhai Pandya has written entitled Sanskrit Swayam Shishak, Sanskrit Self-Teacher, is 18 volumes, and these have been first and foremost helpful to me in speaking the Sanskrit language. When I studied this, then I could understand scriptures such as Mahabharata, the Ramayana, and the Gita, and then I did not have the need for translations.
When I studied this, then I could understand the scriptures such as the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, and the Gita, and then I did not have the need for translations. I would read a few verses and I would know the meanings. This is because I've always seen that one who has the love towards language, then the language begins to talk with us. When one has love towards their mother tongue, and we can therefore understand it when our mother speaks to us. In the same way, if we love a language like our mother, then the language is our mother begins to speak to us. I studied in Gujarati and got the tease to learn English. Therefore, I studied English. Now I can give discourses in English. I could not speak Sanskrit and could not have conversations in Sanskrit. This is because You can only learn to speak a language when there is somebody to speak to you in that language. You can find many people that speak English, but who could I find to speak Sanskrit with? For this I found Pramilaben. Therefore 2 wishes of mine became fulfilled with her. The first was that I want to speak Sanskrit, and I could speak to her and yet on the telephone or whenever we spoke. The second wish was one I had for a very long time, that I wanted to get my daughters taught Sanskrit, and I wanted to give them what I myself was deprived of. Pramilaben is very occupied, and as a lot of activities, she would be in Mumbai, one there, and then one day in Vadodara, another day, then she would be in Ahmedabad on another day, and then somewhere else on another day. Despite this, whenever she would be in Mumbai, she would call me herself and say that, "Brother, I'm in Mumbai. When would it suit your daughters?" And Pramilaben comes to teach my daughters Sanskrit. In this way, I have a request, because I always say that I can only tell you something that I put into practice myself. If I do not do it myself, then how can I tell you? I make efforts to learn it, and I make efforts to teach it to my children. And that is why I make a request to you all, that you should all also learn it. It is never too late. If I say it in a simple village language in Gujarati, then Thoriya Chali Varse Sharu Karo Che. They began learning at the age of 40. This is what we should do about learning Sanskrit. If we have not done it already, I have met people in Europe or America will begin learning the Sanskrit language at the ages of 40 or 50. And 5 to 7 years can be called a very long time, but they begin speaking Sanskrit in that time. When I meet such people through my foreign journeys, I get a lot of bliss, and I get a lot of pride towards our language. And at the same time, I get a little hurt that why you are the people who remain deprived of this. If a person who has no support, who has a different culture, with a different language, and who has a different way of life, begins learning Sanskrit out of love at the age of 40 or 50 and can learn it in 5 years, then it is our own language. It is our support. We can certainly know Sanskrit, and therefore there is no need to have the mask that I cannot understand Sanskrit. On the majority of occasions, I see that this is a fear in people, that they cannot understand it. When verses are written in Gujarati, then Gujarati people get courage that they'll be able to speak it because it is in Gujarati. But when it is written in Devanagari, then they say that it is in Sanskrit, and therefore they will not understand it. How can you not understand it? You can certainly understand it. You need efforts. On this auspicious day, from the Indian Sanskrit establishment, I make a request particularly on behalf of myself, and if you at least create a positive attitude, then it is enough. Let us make such a resolve, and I feel that just like in Maharashtra, when during festivals people put up sticks with flags on them, and you can see many of them in the same way, maybe the next century will be such that the flags of Sanskrit will be flying everywhere throughout the whole year, and learning of Sanskrit will remain running in everywhere. I place this divine wish at the feet of Supreme Soul, and we move further towards Purushottam, the Supreme Being, and towards Purushottam Yuga, the Yoga of Supreme Being. We say that Sarva Shastrama Gita, my Gita. The Gita is the essence of all scriptures. But of the 18 chapters of Gita, saints say that the essence of these 18 chapters is the 15th chapter. We will see later in this chapter, in the 20th verse, where Sri Krishna will say, "It's guhya tamam shastram idam uktam Maya Naga. Thus has this most secret doctrine been taught by me, O blameless one. This is a Shastra, as Sri Krishna says in that verse. What is a Shastra? That which has the way of govern and the rules of how to govern is a Shastra. That which has the rules for a ruler is a Shastra. And who is this ruler? Each and every one of us are the rulers of our own bodies. We are all rulers of our own lives. In what direction can we take this journey of life that we have been traveling on 4 births and births? We are in the driver's seat, but are we driving it properly? Are we taking it into the right direction? That which has given this wisdom and these rules is Shastra. The 15th chapter is a Shastra. It is extremely short. Rules are different and articles are different. With articles, you can even run your imagination as much as you want, and you can talk about colors and describe everything very nicely. All of this can work in an article about Shastra. It's a set of rules. In this, the clearer you become and the more concise you become, the greater it gets. There is nothing strange in it, and God has only said 20 verses in this chapter, but the Shastra of all of our lives has been placed in this chapter. In this chapter, first of all, the tree of material world was described. Then Sri Krishna showed what our relationship with the history of the material world was. Then he showed us how to cut that relationship. Asanga shastrena drirena chitva. Cut this firm-rooted peepal tree with the strong sword of attachment. Thereafter, the form which we really are was described, the form of the individual soul. It was shown how the individual soul leaves one body and goes into another body. It was shown how the individual soul begins its life in a new body. The subtle body, the astral body, and the casual body. Then the causal body. Then God said, you are not different. The funding is in this is that God described the tree of the material world, described the individual soul. Then the Supreme Soul described himself, and together with all of this, God says, oh, individual soul, you are mine. God said in the 7th verse, Mamai Vansho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. A fragment or fraction of my own self becomes a living soul eternal. God said that the individual soul is an internal fragment of himself and that you are his. When God says that you are mine, then this is one thing. And when God says that I am yours, then this is another thing. God said both of these things. When God says that you are mine, then there is a feeling of our ownership. If I tell someone that you are mine, but this implies that I make orders, then this person will have to follow them. No, I'm yours. When one says that this, then a relationship is created out of it. In saying that you are mine, there is a one-sided relationship. In saying I am yours, there is a complete relationship. It is a strong bond. It is the same difference as between holding one hand and holding both hands. God said that I am also yours. And if a devotee perhaps asks that God, are you really mine? I do not feel like it, Lord, because in the material world I feel as if I am very alone. God said that do not think that. Experience a little. Sarvaya cha aham bridisan navishtam. I am lodged in the hearts of all. Not only did God say that He is yours, but He also says that He is constantly with us. Not only that, but everything that is happening in our lives is happening because of God. Mataha smritir gnanam apo ahnam cha. From me, our memory, and knowledge as well as their loss. God said that in all our everyday things we should remember Him. God said that He is indeed He who is to be known by all the Vedas. He indeed is the author of Vedanta, and He too is the knower of the Vedas. After the Supreme Soul creates a divine relationship with us, in the 16th verse, the Lord shows His Purushottam Tamatva, supremeness, and described this.